both application and security Informatica can provide together as well as independently solutions to meet your needs. So as you've probably seen, there have been a number of data breaches in the industry. And as you build out this slide, or look through the slide, you'll see that regardless of the industry and around the world, there have been and continue to be breaches. Now, what we've seen is that a lot of these breaches are occurring within organizations because of internal compromises. So that means through internal users, whether they're maliciously or unknowingly compromising data, they've actually released a lot of information that is then resulting in these breaches. The problem is that organizations are still not restricting or not preventing user access to this sensitive data. And as a result, they also are unable to comply with the data privacy and continued regulations around the world. So most of these organizations lack confidence that they've been able to detect the data that's leaving their production as well as non-production environments. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see the organizations around the world that have these issues, including the laws for PCI DSS, HIPAA, financial services, and so forth. So whether you're talking about organizations and branches that you have in the EU or Asia Pac, within the United States as well, there's been a large variability among the different states, such as Massachusetts and other states. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see where these issues can impact, in particular, per each regulation and what that means for the specific audit requirements that you may have. So how does that affect the in-scope or the inventory of in-scope databases and sources of data? How does it affect the vulnerability and configuration assessment, the threat monitoring, and the user rights review and separation of duties? And these are all things that we'll talk to later in more detail. So if you go to the next slide, this is where, in our discussion today, we really want to focus on data-centric security and the ability to support all these different endpoints and all these different data sources, whether it's production data, master data, data coming from data warehouses, test and development data, or data coming from point-of-sale systems, data in various mobile devices or endpoints, cloud data, and big data, as you may have heard of, as related to Hadoop and other places. So Informatica and application security are supporting and enabling security in this increasingly complex world through a process which includes being able to define the data, so defining what sensitive data is, where it is, and discovering where that sensitive data lives, and applying the appropriate rules to protect that data, and finally measuring and monitoring and proving that you protected the data as you said you would, or identifying the areas where you may have breaches. And so it's through this process in each phase that we'll discuss the appropriate tools that you can use to address each part of this life cycle. To go to the next slide, we'll talk about how we complement each other in this data governance life cycle. And in the define step, we'll talk about how application security can support database-specific policies, how Informatica can support the definition of specific data and metadata patterns, and then using those definitions, then we can go on and do a complete inventory of the database, discovery database, as well as discover data or metadata regardless of the source, database or otherwise. And then using that information about where the sensitive data lives, we can then apply the appropriate masking technique or data protection technique, whether it's for test data or for production data. And then finally, with our tools, you can audit and monitor the data, so show that the data has been protected or masked, as you said it would be and when it was masked, as well as continue to alert where the vulnerabilities are, perform the vulnerability assessments and the database rights assessments. Next slide. Okay, and so we'll start off with being able to define the sensitive data and policies.
Okay, thank you, Karen. So initially, we can define policies governing how data, the database, and users are to be managed. And we can do this through setting policies. We define policies from two perspectives. First, point-in-time policies. Now, policies around uncovering vulnerabilities and a threshold level that your organization is willing to live with. Configuration settings, especially settings and parameters that govern some of the security controls and powerful features within these databases. And policies around access controls. Access controls that govern the entire security privilege system within these databases. And second, policies around governing what's happening, or what's happening in real time. Here we set activity monitoring policies around threat activity threshold levels, or just behavior, what's acceptable or not acceptable activity. So here we had a number of different categories in regards to threat activity, such as accessing operating system resources, buffer overflows, password attacks, substantiating privilege escalation attacks, use of security tools, and so on. Acceptable and not acceptable activity would be simply saying customer A could actually look at this data and customer B and C can't.
So using this information, we can then define the specific data patterns and metadata patterns that we're looking for, including things like a credit card number, social security number, and other things that are data patterns. But if you have metadata patterns that may be based on specific names or roles that you're looking for, like Eric described earlier, then you have things, patterns you can create and define within Informatica. And that takes you then to the next stage, which is being able to discover the data. And so if we go to the next slide, we can start discussing how Informatica can help you, and as well as application security can help you discover where the sensitive data is. So based on these metadata patterns or data patterns, you can identify where in these different sources the sensitive data lives. And so Informatica can, in this example, provide you a view of all the different applications and whether or not you've classified the data, the sensitive data, whether you've mitigated or assigned a particular masking technique to it, as well as executed the appropriate technique. And so being able to discover where the sensitive data across all sources is important, but in particular databases, because of the nature of structured data and the fact that so much of the data still resides in databases. So I'll hand it over to Eric to talk about the database-specific discovery.
So as you discover sensitive data across all data sources, definitely databases are definitely one of the most popular of them all. With that said, staying on top of all your installations is most important, and basically just simply maintain a complete inventory of databases, the types of databases, their respective components, and the objects contained within the database, especially tables which contain sensitive information. You also want to be aware of any new or rogue installations, especially know about the types and versions installed. Also know what's their security posture. What are they actually susceptible to being attacked from? What are the possible attack vectors against these databases? And what users are present? And what are their privileges? To what extent do their rights permeate throughout the database, especially privileges to view sensitive data? Do they have admin level privileges? And are these rights explicitly granted? Are they system privileges? And how were they granted? And here I'll pass it on to Karen to actually talk about the next stage.
Great. And just an aside on the discovery side of things, what we've seen from a lot of our customers is the need to be able to discover the sensitive data wherever it lives and then use that as part of then the application process. So whether it's in a database or in another source, companies or organizations are looking to apply consistent data protection across these different places. And that includes things like be able to set customer name as it lives as CNAME or cust_name or customer_name in all the different tables and all the different applications that you may have. And so if you go to the next slide, what Informatica provides is an ability to support the application of these data protection policies consistently through a number of environments, including on the development side and test side through our products for Informatica Test Data Management. And Informatica Test Data Management is composed of two main capabilities, including the ability to persistently or permanently mask data, as well as being able to subset or create smaller copies of the test environment, the production environment for test and development purposes. Now, if you build this slide out, you'll see that in addition to supporting non-production environments or test and development environments, Informatica also provides the ability to mask data in production environments and what we is then dynamic data masking. So if you go on to the next slide, you'll see that Informatica, in terms of best practices in working with customers, provides subsetting. And this is because many customers of our day still create or make replications of their production environments for test and development purposes. Now, complete and full copies, and it ranged from 8 to 12 per organization, and that has been a big storage cost as well as maintenance cost. And so most of our customers are looking to subset that production environment to create smaller copies for particular testing purposes, and therefore not only save in time, but also in hardware. So you can do things like test a particular revenue recognition rule for Germany by taking a small set of the production database specific to the sales transactions for Germany to test that revenue recognition rule actually has worked. So what Informatica does is allow you to create these smaller subsets in an automated way, and that is based on a number of rules and filter criteria, and that again saves, if you go to the next slide, millions of dollars in some cases. And for one of our customers, Icon Solutions, they saved $1.5 million in storage costs and in related costs over 2 to 3 years, and saw a payback within 6 months. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that in addition to subsetting, people will want to mask the data at the same time. So you've created a smaller subset of your production environment for test purposes, but you still have that data sitting there that is live and not secured. So at the same time you subset, then Informatica enables you to mask that data. And that is persistent data masking that we apply at the same time you subset. And that then includes rules and techniques specific to your organization, whether they're blurring or other techniques. So we'll first talk about persistent data masking, and then we'll talk about how dynamic data masking addresses the production environment. So for masking of non-production environments, Informatica enables you to permanently mask data such as credit card information, address information, name information, types of data according to a number of techniques. And those techniques, if you build this slide out, include blurring, shuffling, skewing for things like salary ranges, as well as substitution. So Informatica provides with the product a number of substitution libraries for first name, last name, for full name, and you can use those to jumpstart your implementation. We also enable replacing cities by a constant, as well as other techniques to randomly generate numbers or to create credit card or social security numbers. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that Informatica also packages pre-built masking packs for specific industries or specific use cases, such as personally identifiable information, personal health information, and payment card information. And that means we've identified what the fields are, for these specific areas. So for example, age for personal identifiable information, phone numbers or social security number for personal health information, and then credit card numbers. And then we've associated the appropriate masking technique. So are you randomly masking age with a range between 18 and 60? Or do you need to mask a social security number or credit card number? So these pre-built masking packs are designed to accelerate your implementations according to these specific regulations and also industries. So we go to the next slide. You'll see that Informatica has built an interface that's specifically designed for data privacy users, and that includes being able to create the rules very quickly, as well as underlying support with a powerful engine behind the scenes, large volumes of data, and also connect to any system that you have within your organization. And that is because Informatica's technology is based upon leading data integration technology, is rated by the analysts and customers over the years for not only supporting large volumes of data, but connecting to any data source. So if we go to the next slide, Informatica supports this connectivity to any platform, but builds upon that connectivity an awareness and a deep understanding of the applications. So for SAP, Siebel, PeopleSoft, and Oracle Business, Informatica has built accelerators for each of the, supporting each of the new releases. And in this way, Informatica can do three things. First of all, understand and identify where that sensitive data lives, what those fields are, assign the appropriate masking technique, and then cascade the application of that masking technique across the different tables within that application. So for example, PeopleSoft Human Capital Management, we have an understanding of where all the sensitive fields are, and includes things like salary, but not just salary, but salary monthly, salary daily, salary weekly, and then apply the appropriate masking technique, which is a skewing technique to make the salary into a certain range, the salary value into a certain range, and then apply that consistently across all the places within the application where salary is used. So we do that for masking, and we do that for subset, so that when you need to create a subset of these different applications, we provide an understanding of where the high volume tables are, what needs to be subsetted to ensure referential integrity, but also if you have some low volume tables, you can just bring those over directly instead of subsetting them. So this is our ability to support the connectivity to any platform, any application, and any database. So as you can see here, Informatica has broad support for all databases, but also mainframe systems and other types of data sources. And that's where Informatica's differentiation in being able to support unstructured data as well as semi-structured data into structured data comes in. So we can mask not only HIPAA, EDI, and other FIX and other types of data, but we can also mask unstructured data as well. So go to the next slide. We'll talk now about, and if you build this slide out, we'll talk now about our dynamic data masking capabilities. And this is different than the persistent data masking because this is, these masking capabilities are typically applied to production environments. So if we look at how dynamic data masking works, and go to the next slide, see in this example how our dynamic data masking sits in line between the database and the client. And what our dynamic data masking does is intercept the SQL queries so that we take into account that information about the user request, couple that with the user rights and privileges and the data privacy specific rules to then rewrite the SQL back to the client so that the client sees only the data they should. So as an example, let's look at the far left-hand corner. You see that an authorized user in the far left-hand corner is able to see the data in the clear. Now, there may be an IT administrator who you only want to see the last 4 digits of this number. So you can do that using masking capabilities because we have an understanding of this IT administrator who's trying to access this data and then masking the data accordingly to that rule. In a different way, you may have an offshore support person who you want the data to be completely scrambled for. And that's, again, where you can have another rule that then scrambles the data for that user. So what our dynamic data masking enables you to do is to take in the information about who this user is, what the privacy rules are, where this user is. So, for example, if you are a user traveling from Florida to Boston, and there are different rules in terms of what you can see, or if you're a user traveling from UK to Switzerland, and there are different rules in terms of what you can see in the data, you can all govern that and make that change happen dynamically. And the important thing to note is that this dynamic masking does not change the database or the application anyway. It only changes the view of that data. The view of that data. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see an example of how this works. In an Oracle application where we've dynamically masked the data for the national identification number. And this can be used to quickly support not only applications, but also data warehouses. And so we have customers who are using us to mask data within business objects or Teradata. If you go to the next slide, our solution for dynamic data masking really extends and complements existing encryption or tokenization solutions out there, because what we're doing is protecting the data within the application screens, reports, and the development tools. So we're protecting the data in motion, whereas encryption protects the data at rest. And in cases where you have a database where you have a number of users who have access to this data, dynamic data masking provides that extra level and that additional safeguard to ensure that these privileged users don't see the data that they don't really need to in order to do their jobs. And so if you go to the next slide, what Informatica does is really extend the capabilities that encryption has so that you can realize the benefits of protecting data for these unauthorized users in addition to authorized users. So let's go to the next slide. And I just want to end on some facts about our dynamic data masking and how it supports high availability and performance. A number of our customers have been using dynamic data masking for years, have not had any performance penalties or issues, and that's largely because of the architecture that dynamic data masking has. And this will differ from encryption or some tokenization solutions, which will impact performance and over time because of the application code and other additions that are required impact performance. So our dynamic data masking consumes very little of the CPU cores, and the throughput is completely untouched by dynamic data masking. Now, I'll transition it over to Eric, and before we do so, one of the things that we wanted to just talk about in terms of measure and monitor process is the fact that dynamic data masking captures a lot of information about the SQL request. And that information can then be passed to application security, for example, to be consolidated with the other information that application security collects for identifying malicious acts or noncompliance. In addition, Informatica provides measuring and monitoring tools so that you can actually show that the data has been masked as you said it would be masked. And so as a best practice, organizations sharing these reports with their audit and compliance teams will take a few reports. One is a report on where the data, what the masking policy was, where the masking policy was, or when it was actually applied, and then what actually happened to the data in terms of the values, what the data was changed to, as a result of the masking technique. So now I'll hand it over to Eric to talk through the other measuring and monitoring capabilities that application security has.
Thank you, Karen. So as we measure and monitor the effectiveness of our masking program, we must do the same for all of the governance policies that we define within the database. For example, how we've been trending in regards to our security posture. How have our rights and privilege policies been trending? Are they trending towards a better state? And what is our risk exposure? Which databases are at most risk? And how do these databases compare with each other? Also want to know, how has my activity level been? Have there been any alerts on actual database level threats or exploits as depicted here in this slide? Or any malicious acts? Or just simple non-compliant activity? I guess, Karen, would you like to take from here?
Sure. And so to summarize, we've talked about a number of areas here in terms of how application security and Informatica work together to address all parts of the life cycle, starting with defining where the sensitive data is, where what specific policies have to be addressed, whether it's configuration, security, privilege, or activity, as well as then using those definitions to come up with an understanding of where the sensitive data is. So doing that inventory of the databases, doing the discovery of the databases, as well as any source of data. And then with that understanding of where the sensitive data is, apply the appropriate technique and proactively ensure that the breaches don't occur because you are restricting access, either for production environments or permanently masking the data in your testing and development environments. And then finally, with audit capabilities, we're able to show where the data has been masked, so you can prove compliance and what it has been masked to, as well as continue to show and provide alerts on where your database vulnerabilities are and perform database rights assessments. If you go to the next slide, we can talk about some of the customers that Informatica has had in supporting data privacy, both production as well as non-production environments. So we'll take some examples here. Financial services space, where you have customers who have had to support 10,000 different databases in order to meet the regulatory requirements. So they had to integrate with a DBA portal and provide an information competency center that was a service to all the business units that had to protect their data. So the challenge before with this organization is that they had many different groups that each had their own individual databases and systems, and it was becoming increasingly expensive, so costly and time-consuming to maintain, because they had these individual database scripts and hand codes that they created to support these different databases. And so they created this centralized service to mask the data for all these thousands of databases. So they had a consistent way, but also a scalable way of managing risk compliance and actually through the masking of the data. We also have customers on the healthcare side who need to protect their data on the production environment, where they are using us to, for example, mask data within their research portals. So these customers are using us to protect data dynamically when customers are doing queries, such, is a patient receiving or dealing with treatment on the East Coast and is a smoker between the ages of 18 and 24, in a similar way to, say, a patient of that treatment on the West Coast between the ages of 18 and 24 and a smoker. So our tool enables these healthcare organizations to dynamically mask the personal health information so the researchers can comply with HIPAA and High-Tech Act, but still do the necessary analysis. And Another example of development and test environment is in other industries like pharmaceutical and the retail. And in pharmaceuticals in particular, we have a customer who has been able to outsource completely the application support of their application, their .com or their customer-facing company website, so that their outsourced resources can now support and test this application for future releases. And this organization was facing a lot of internal scrutiny because they failed a number of audits internally for managing data privacy, and so they had to quickly find a solution in order to mitigate this risk. Now, because they also had the goal of completely outsourcing, they needed Informatica to permanently mask the data so they actually could do that outsourcing. And as a result, this company has been able to protect hundreds of different applications, 8 billion different lines, and 8 different rows actually of data, and really save enormous costs in terms of supporting this particular application. And the final example that I wanted to use for the production side was is a telecommunications customer who has a lot of sensitive data that their employees have access to in the call centers. Now, this call center representative doesn't really need to see the credit card information or the phone number or the email of the people that they're dealing with. And this organization was actually firing on a regular basis 2 to 4 people every month because their employees were looking up the information of people, oftentimes famous individuals. And so using our tools, they were able to limit the data that these call center reps had access to for not only Amdocs billing, but Oracle ERP and a number of proprietary applications. So that enabled them to prevent privacy breaches that cost them millions. Now I wanted to hand it over to our next slide and talk about some of the data privacy differentiation. And so we've outlined a number of capabilities within our tools and a number of customer examples, and I just want to highlight a few of the differentiating characteristics, including the ability to support both production and non-production environments in a preventative way through masking. And that is because of, or based on the fact that we can support any type of data, including structured and unstructured, and is also founded on our highly scalable platform, supporting high performance and rapid implementation through the purpose-built interface that we have, the application-aware accelerators that we have, and the pre-built connectivity that we have to all the different systems and sources within the organization. So this time I'd like to hand it over to Eric to speak about some of the customers for application security.
Thank you very much, Karen. So here we also have a number of different examples of how we've helped customers all over the world. So ever since 2001, our solutions have addressed the needs and solved database security problems for many different types of organizations. We've addressed database security needs both in production and non-production environments as well. In production environments of industries such as financial services, where we've empowered this organization to maintain compliance across nearly 10,000 databases across multiple different geographical locations. Retail organizations, where we facilitated compliance of PCI and SAS 70 without disrupting their high transaction environment, and also maintaining the security of their customer information. R&D labs, research and development labs, where our solutions help protect secret formulas and make sure that their key intellectual property remains safe. Not necessarily just from the bad guys on the outside, but also make sure the good guys in the inside are doing the right thing and keep on doing good things. So essentially, the privileged users within these labs. U.S. government. U.S. government, where we help streamline and automate some very laborious and manual tasks specifically around certification and accreditation. And also within development environments, we've helped in industries such as telecommunications and pharmaceutical industries, where we've enabled their development shops to ingratiate database security as part of their software development lifecycle. So at each stage, taking spot assessments and of exactly what your security posture is, make sure that rights and privileges are maintained, entitlements are maintained, all the while monitoring, making sure having some kind of real-time auditing control capability and make sure that things are actually working in steady state. These solutions, which I'm talking about, are named DProtect and App Detective Pro, and here's some, like, I guess, examples of our, I guess, some accolades that we've got for our solutions. As we wrap it up, as you can see, Informatica and application security definitely do have complementary capabilities, and to help deliver complementary or ensure confidentiality, integrity of sensitive data. And a combination of our solutions definitely help you to continually prevent exposure of any sensitive data and comply with today's expanding privacy and compliance regulations. And back over to Karen to actually talk about the special offers.
Thank you, Eric. And like application security, Informatica has been recognized in the industry for supporting and innovating new security technologies. And an example of that is our award earlier this year for the most innovative security product by the Info Security Products Guide for 2012, and this was awarded at the RSA conference in February. In addition to the accolades like application security has, we've also been recognized in the industry by analysts such as Gartner as being one of the cool vendors to watch out for, as well as by ESG and Forrester as having innovative and leading test data management capabilities. And that's reflected then in our work with customers around business value, because we agree that a lot of the focus in the industry has been around risk mitigation, and that is a big source of value for our customers. But in addition to the risk mitigation, we've worked with our customers on defining the efficiencies that you can gain from using our tools. So as you mitigate risk, you are also able to reduce the cost of development, reduce the cost of testing, reduce the cost of producing the reports for compliance and audits, as well as reducing the cost for overall outsourcing. So what we encourage you to do is work with Informatica on this business value assessment, where we walk through each step in the lifecycle for protecting your data from discovery and identifying where the sensitive data is, to ensuring development productivity by using masking rules, global masking rules, by reducing the time that it takes to identify the optimal test case data, so ensuring that you have the test data to back up your specific test case so you actually can accelerate the setup of your testing, as well as increasing the quality because you're using realistic data in your QA and development environment, and really testing the application so that in production you have a high-quality application that results in lower rework and defects. And then we'll work with you to identify how risk can be mitigated in terms of the specific costs that you can avoid, as well as the hardware reduction from being able to subset copies of production for testing purposes. And the last area is around addressing other parts of the business that may care about the value of the data privacy, and that includes compliance and audit through the reports, audit-related reports that we have, and outsourcing, because now you're able to mass the data. You can actually outsource the application development or support. So please contact us if you'd be interested in going through any of these calculations and coming up with ROI analysis or analysis of what your potential savings are by using the data privacy solution.
So thank you, Karen. Also, from application security, we also have a special offer basically no cost and fully functional one-year license. We invite you to actually download App Detector Pro, which is our database scanner, essentially, and you can essentially secure your database or know what your security state of your database is within 15 minutes. Feel free to go to our website, AppSecInc.com, and download a trial. Contact us for a tour of the top features. And if you actually qualify for the offer, you have to agree to provide some usage feedback for a trends report that we're going to be releasing at the end of the year. So again, it's turning your trial into a no-cost, fully functional one-year license. Obviously, some restrictions may apply. Again, it's free. You can secure or know the security state of your database within 15 minutes, and you just get started right now by going to our website and downloading App Detector Pro. So thank you very much. I'll basically wrap it up as we've gone through all the challenges of securing data and data held within databases and providing you with some capabilities, basically options across how do you do this, down to the data, all the way into the actual systems that hold the data, and in regards to this presentation, the actual database. And please take us up on our free offers that we actually putting out there for everyone to try out. And now at this point in the presentation, we leave it up to any questions and answers that you have out there.
We do have a few questions coming in, folks. Remember that you can use your control panel. Just type in the Q&A box, question box. Just type in your question, and we'll go ahead and try to address that. We'll start with the first question, and this address is the availability of the webinar on demand. So we've gotten that from a couple of different folks. So Eric, I'll just jump in and answer that. Over the next 24 to 48 hours, look for an email from Application Security, and that will have instructions on how about obtaining the on-demand webinar. The next question, I think that it's for both of you, and it's around the comment is you guys have shown a lot of great stuff. Where do you think the best place is to start in terms of securing data?
Karen, would you like to start? And maybe I could
Sure.
provide some color?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think the first place to start is in defining what the secure data is, or what the sensitive data is within your organization, what those fields are, including working with legal, the business units that you, in your line of business, your business counterparts in terms of where they think sensitive data may be. Because within an organization, what we find is a lot of times people will say, oh, we have hundreds of fields that we think are sensitive. But after going through an exercise with them or a workshop with them, we find that it actually boils down to about 10 to 20 oftentimes. And then in addition to defining what the sensitive fields are, I mean, it's critical to be able to define the policies that you have. And I'll let Eric talk to some of those policies.
Right. So in regards to actually defining the policies of the actual systems that hold the database, or to hold the data, which would be a database, it's important to also understand exactly what the security posture is, exactly what's your, or even what your organization's threshold level for risk exposure is. Also, it's key to understand all the key controls that are present within a lot of these database management systems, and to also continually monitor. And I will say this, it's not necessarily all about just protecting the actual systems that hold the data. It's all about protecting and making sure they have security across all your databases and all these systems. It's all interrelated, and it's all interconnected, fortunately and unfortunately. So where, for instance, maybe an attacker might not necessarily just want to be trying to get at your data, but they might want to actually use your specific system as a springboard of attack to hit other systems that aren't necessarily present within your network. Could be within another trusted network or another partner's network. So it's a whole holistic view of continually defining policies and also altering them when it's appropriate, essentially calibrate.
Great. Why don't we jump on to the next question? We have a couple more coming in. question is, I'm a current application security customer. Can you tell me how the Informatica product ties into our solutions? I guess it's probably the question about how the solutions work together.
Right. So, Karen, I'll just start off by saying it's right now it's there's no I guess technical integration between the solutions, but the capabilities are complementary. We are in the midst of investigating some possible integration points and in the future. And actually, we look for people out there in the audience to provide any feedback or any suggestions that they may have or things that they'd like to see. Karen, would you like to add your 2 cents?
Sure, and the complementary approach is exactly spot on. I mean, our technologies work very well together in a number of areas, and I'll highlight 2 of them. The first is the fact that application security provides very deep database discovery, and using that information about deep database discovery, we can augment the information Informatica already has about the discovery of the sensitive data across other data sources. So in that way, you have a complete view of where the sensitive data is across your databases, across your different sources that are not databases, for unstructured data, for semi-structured data, and so you really have that complete coverage there in terms of understanding the full risk exposure that you have. So that's the first use case, is full data discovery, and the fact that we can provide you that complete view. Now, where the integration comes in and where it ties in is then Informatica can use that information about the database vulnerabilities as well as about all the other data sources to then create the appropriate masking rules then on all your different and varied data sources, whether they're database or other. And then finally, what that means is, in the second major use case, is being able to take the information that we have that we use during the masking process, and again to populate and support the measuring and monitoring part of the life cycle. And that goes back to what Eric was talking about in terms of this interrelated set of issues that we're dealing with, because when we're masking data in a production environment, dynamically masking it, we're actually intercepting the SQL request to get that data about what the user's accessing. So that's extremely critical, because now we can say, all right, we know this particular user with this profile in this group is looking up this a particular account at 5 a.m., 10 p.m., 6 p.m., and all different times of the day, and can feed that now to the monitoring that application security is already doing to fill out then the behavioral policies and understanding of the behavioral policies, so that you can identify malicious activity or noncompliance, and show up then in those reports, where the malicious behavior could be occurring.
Okay, we have time for 2 last questions. About the free product, I guess this is more for you, Eric. What restrictions apply to the free version of AppProtector Pro from the license perspective, the promo perspective?
So in regards to the promotional goes, if you qualify, it's essentially a full-blown solution. It's where you're able to discover databases, perform an assessment of both unauthenticated and authenticated assessment, which will bring back your vulnerability posture as well as your rights or privilege posture within the given database, and that's for one database. So as far as restriction goes, there's no restrictions, but it's just limited only to one database.
Sounds great. And the last question is around the discovery engine. What is your discovery engine in discovering the details about the database? So, for instance, how do you go about getting the version number of tables, schema, etc.?
Okay, so in regards to, I'll talk about our discovery in regards to the databases and the actual objects and so on. It's we have a capability to actually simply from an authenticated standpoint, actually go out to your network, and by plugging in IP and port range, go back and tell you exactly like how many databases you got and what kind of databases they are, what versions they are through our discovery engine. As you dig in deeper and authenticate into the given database, there we're able to, through our rights review engine, we're able to actually pull back and extrapolate exactly all the various objects, tables, views, and triggers, and so on, and also tell you who has privilege to what within the given database. And that's through our rights review engine as well.
That sounds great. Well, thank you very much. I think that's all we have time for today. Again, thank you very much for attending today's session. And if either of you two have any final thoughts, why don't you could just wrap it up? That'd be great.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I just want to, again, thank you guys for your time. Thank you all for your time today. And if you have any questions, please reach out to Eric or myself, and we'll have our contact information available so you can reach out to us, as well as anyone in our respective organizations.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone. And yes, please, I offer anybody to actually reach out to us directly if you have any questions or just want to talk about data or database security. Thank you very much.